Adam Robinson, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. For the folks out there who are on LinkedIn, they are really aware of just all the awesome things that you've been doing, particularly on LinkedIn for a lot of different movements that we'll talk about here in a second. But I want to kick it off kind of diving into what inspired you to move from a Wall Street trader in New York City? I remember meeting you a couple of weeks ago at the Golden Hour, and you were telling me a little bit about that, to now being a technology entrepreneur.
So, you know, growing up, I always kind of wanted to be an entrepreneur. And the only real reason was because there weren't very many. I grew up in Houston in like the 90s, and like entrepreneurship was not as big back then. Certainly a thing to be in America, but like it just what, most of our dads work for oil companies in Houston,
Yeah.
like that. Everybody's sweating it out. And the couple entrepreneurs I knew, like they just seemed to have like a this a little bit of freedom in their lifestyle. Like one of my friend's dads had an office that looked over the high school baseball field where his son like practiced every day. And I looked at that and I was like, man, that's just so cool. Like, I don't know where my dad's going every day, but he's gone for a long time. And like this guy goes across the street from the high school and can like go watch his kid play whenever he wants. Like that just sounds awesome. And then, you get done with college and it's like, well, I don't know. I just want to get a good job. What's that mean? Something that pays a lot of money. So like, I started at Lehman Brothers, which was like, it's like Goldman Sachs or whatever. It's like a big investment bank. And I had this job trading credit default swaps, which if you want to know what that's like, they made a movie about it called The Big Short. And they did a pretty good job at capturing what the world is like that you're in if you do that job. And, the day I show up to New York, there's these guys who I got connected with, share an apartment with through a high school friend of mine. And they were working on this website, which was early, 2003. And it was called Vimeo.com, the video sharing website. So like, as you can imagine, I watched these guys like have this incredible ride with that whole situation. And, I was envious of it. Like, I had a crazy ride myself, made more money than I ever thought that I was. Made millions of dollars in my 20s, which is crazy. But like, they were getting something, I couldn't really identify it, but it just seemed like they were enjoying what they were doing more than I was. They were getting a type of satisfaction out of what they were doing. Now I know that it is because in that trading job, the only reason I was there was to extract money from the financial system for myself. And the value of a human being is based upon the perceived amount that they have extracted from the system for themselves. Whereas what I do now is building, right? Like, and I think humans we just like building things. Like it is a fundamental driver of all of humanity. Like we fucking build, we build whatever, we build families, we build, buildings, we build houses, we build companies, we build sandcastles when we're 1 year old. Like we just can't help ourselves but to build. So if you can put yourself in a situation where your whole life is building stuff, I think it's like aligned with a very fundamental driver of like primal human satisfaction. So I love it. I mean, I'm trying to make this last as long as possible. Like, I'm definitely not one of these guys who's like, oh yeah, like I'm going to punt this thing for $100 million and like, you'll never see me again. Like, that's not really what it's about. For me, I maybe thought it was when I started this because I was coming from Wall Street, but I'm 11 or 12 years in, and I hope I can say one day that I'm 40 years in.
Totally.
And then I'm still in the game, right? Like the game, I think, is like so valuable for your life, for mine at least, which is crazy to say because it's hard to get to that point where it feels that way. I mean, it's really hard in the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah,
totally. I mean, there are a couple of things there that really stand out, in terms of like the motivation to get into the game, the attractiveness of entrepreneurship. My father would leave at like 5 o'clock in the fucking morning and he would come home at midnight. And I grew up in the 80s, 90s myself. And I was like, man, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I remember going to college And looking at in the career center, looking at all the options, I was like, this is fucking nuts. How am I going to sit in an office for, what am I supposed to do? Like 8 hours a day for 60 years and then just croak? Like, this didn't
Yeah,
make any sense to me.
it
And there
doesn't
was
sound awesome.
yeah, I mean, but this is like the society, right? The model that I was supposed to sell. I was going to be a psychologist actually, because my father, that's what he does. And so there was a little bit of autonomy around thinking like, oh, maybe I can build my own practice. But then I got bit by the bug, and I met a venture capitalist. And I was a junior in undergrad, and this was like 2001. And I got worked on the project, and the rest is history. But I wanted to dive into the bootstrapping kind of concept, right? Because you have made a bunch of money doing finance and also in software, and have been exposed to a lot of different ways. In fact, you had this awesome post on kind of your approach to building a company right now that used a lot of the similar concepts that a VC backed company, Drift, used a while ago to build a great brand, and those sort of things. Who should bootstrap, and why, or why not? Like, is there a specific type of individual or DNA that really lends itself better to it?
So first of all, I think if you can, you should. And it's just a matter of like, where are you going to get this money to get started? I had this immense good fortune to have saved like $2 million, and I spent every nickel of it. And I think if it were 200 grand, I still would have gotten that business off the ground and would have been fine. I think if it were $4 million, it would have consumed every nickel of it, because that's what startups do, especially on your first time. You're so emotional about it, and you're so committed, and like it will just consume all of the resources around it. So it's like, okay, where do I get the dough? So like restaurants are funded all the time, you know? And then you know why? It's because that person's betting on you. They're not betting on the odds that a restaurant will succeed in a competitive restaurant market, which you're likely, starting it in. So I think if you're capable of raising money to start a restaurant, which happens every day, you could raise money to be like, hey, by the way, like I'm going to build a tech company, but I'm not going to do it in some way where it's like a 1% chance that it's $1 trillion company. Like I'm going to make like a solid, business, and you friends and family only, no institutional capital. The problem is in the beginning, you think you need more money than you do always, and you'll take any money you can get because you view that as, imperative for survival. So most people get put in this very difficult position, but that is what I would do personally. If I didn't have dough, I would go out and get a story good enough that's the equivalent of getting like restaurant money and get started. Or man, a lot of like I came from the email newsletter space. A lot of
Mm,
these companies started as agencies. Like
mm,
MailChimp started as an agency, and
yeah.
then they sort of built the SaaS on it. It's like, it's a little Gary V or whatever, but like there's no shame in keeping your job until you have something that's working. And by the way, I don't think if you're a first time founder, you should start with SaaS. I think
Mm,
you should start by selling something completely different,
mm,
because SaaS is freaking hard. And if you're a non-technical founder, it's even harder, because who's going to work with you? My CTO for 12 years, thank the Lord, swam with my brother at Stanford and was a comp sci major. So I have this guy who is the level of human being that it takes to be an all-American swimmer at Stanford and major in comp sci at the same time. Can you even imagine
Yeah.
how incredible this
The
human being
stars
is?
aligned for
Yeah,
sure.
exactly. It's like no one's like that, right?
Yeah.
Which like that's the reason that I can just like spin up RB2B in 6 weeks,
Yeah.
right? Like, so there's just a lot of problems in the beginning, but if you can bootstrap, I would recommend it. And I think there's like this binary way of looking at bootstrapping where it's like, okay, you could either go raise venture and then your outcome will happen in X years, right? Or you can bootstrap and it's going to happen in 12 years. I don't actually think that reflects what I perceive as the reality of the entrepreneurial journey. I perceive the reality of the entrepreneurial journey as these kind of S curves where you unlock something, then you get stuck. Then you unlock something else, then you get stuck again. Then you unlock something else, and you get stuck again. Now, if you layer on the venture capital backdrop to that stacking of S curves, it gets very fucking difficult.
Mm.
I don't even need to explain why. You get
Yeah.
stuck once after you've raised money off of the explosion that you thought was going to go on forever and didn't, right? Which I'm sure has happened. I mean, if you've been in the game for a long time, this has happened to you. It's going faster than you ever thought it would, and then it just fucking flattens out, right? Like it just happens, and that's like a gnarly environment to like be venture backed in. So, kind of by dumb luck, the career path I fell into was I was working on Wall Street, putting a tie on, waking up at 4:45 in the morning, going to a glass tower every single day for 10 years. I quit, and I'm like, after the financial crisis, I started reading these books like 37 Signals Rework and like 4-Hour Work Week or whatever. And it's like, wait a second. This is pre-remote work. It's like, wait a second. These guys are running these companies with 5 people, and they're surfing, and they're like living in Bali, and they're like making dollars and like paying these VAs and like rupees and like consuming whatever the Balinesian baht or whatever it is. Like, how do I do that? Right. So
Totally.
like this like totally became, I was single, and like this just became my obsession. So somehow it didn't start that way. Like at my first company, it ended up being like this boiler room call center for the first 2 years. And then we burnt through all the leads, and it was 3 million ARR, and then it shrunk. And then it was like 3 million ARR, $1.50 to the bottom line. I had some co-founders, and it was stuck there. And like, then it was like exactly what I wanted. I left New York. I turned into a digital nomad, and I was like, this is great. Problem is, the more information you take, it's like being stuck sucks. Like, even if that thing kept growing like at a slow rate, I think I might even still be doing it or something like that. I don't know, but like being stuck blows, and like you just, I'm squarely in the camp of, especially with tech, if it is not growing and growing fast, it's dying, So like, that's never a good situation to find yourself in.
Yeah.
Right? Like I have this thing, it's dying. What do I do? But what's my point in all this? I don't think the degree of difficulty of bootstrapping something to low single digit MRR with a low number of employees that generates cash is very high. It is certainly a lot lower degree of difficulty than trying to go for it with a venture-backed startup.
Yeah.
What that allows you to do, if you can get that vehicle spitting out cash and get someone else to manage it, you can go try to stack another vehicle on top of it. And the second vehicle you stack on top of it will very likely, with everything you learned on the first, be much more successful than the first one. Then if you can get 2 of these things stacked on top of each other and do that again, the third thing, so like, this is what I'm trying to say. It's like, there is a point at which when you're bootstrapping that it turns magical.
Yeah.
Right. Like, for me, like I was freaked out because I was like mid-30s. I was, making 500 grand, but living in Manhattan. And I was looking at private school. It's like, I wanted to have a family. It's like, this doesn't work. Right. Like, and I couldn't, no matter what I did, I couldn't get the thing to make any more money. So it was literally a deep financial motivation to figure something else out. Right. So business number 2, now it's spitting off like 6 or 7 million that I'm splitting with my co-founders. Right. Like, which that's great. I mean, it's
Which
in a
you
weird
can't
situation.
necessarily do at a VC back thing, right? Where you got a whole
No way,
board.
dude, no way. Like they don't, literally no fucking way. Right.
Yeah.
Like that's one of the biggest problems. Like, so what I'm saying is there's a point and by the way, what's going on with RB2B right now, like we haven't really figured the monetization out, but like it's,
Yeah, you have thousands of
it is
signups.
100 times better than the company that I started that's currently at 22 million ARR and spitting out $6 million to me, right?
Yeah.
Like it is 100 times better than that, right? So like what is motivating me right now? It's like, I look, it's not all about money, but like, I think we're like a year or 2 away from being in this magical position where it's like this wholly owned by the founders EBITDA machine that's like 15, 20 million EBITDA, growing. We're working on interesting shit with great people. And like, I can't think of anything better than that.
Yeah,
Right. But
totally.
like, that's not really like, you know, that's not, that is not the typical explanation when you analyze, should I bootstrap or take VC for this?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. I was a huge fan of 37 Signals and their whole model for a long time. In fact, my little 37 Signals story is in 2004, I came up with this basically a Facebook clone for travel. It was in the consumer space, and we sent out an RFP because I'm non-technical, which is a whole nother miserable existence a lot of the time. But
Yeah,
anyways,
me too.
if
Me
you're in
too.
software, right?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, we sent out an RFP to 37 Signals because they were one of the first Ruby on Rails shops. In fact, yeah, they actually, I think,
Yeah.
were the
Created it basically.
yeah, right, that open source project. So huge fan of that, and everything that you spoke to was really what I was thinking in when I first got into this game. And then I had a co-founder who was like, "No, we got to go out to Silicon Valley, dude. Like, we got to go and raise venture capital." I'm like, "I'm in Florida. I don't know what the fuck venture
Right.
capital was in that way." um I did meet that VC I told you about, but it was a different type of model, right? Like
Yeah.
there was like, it was like military tech and so on. But like as we understand the VC game, I think in modern startup culture, I had no idea. So I went out there, and for so long, Adam, it was like this game about, in my mind, about raising VC money, right? And it
Right.
really took away from the idea of actually building a solid business. And over time, like, you deal with a lot of ups and downs and, rejection and all this stuff. And I realized that, and actually a couple years ago, I had a couple experiences where I was helping good friends launch some businesses, and they got a lot of money in the bank from these institutional VCs, and then you kept seeing the same thing, like people like the board firing you from your own company and things of that nature. And I was just like, you know what? I'm finally free from this, like, what felt like ego slash I want to be a cool kid kind of experience, to now wanting to like have something sustainable that we can do for a long time, that was on our terms. Look, if it's not going to work out, I rather that happen on my terms and
Yep.
not on some board's terms that uh that I maybe don't necessarily align with across the board. So that really really makes a lot of sense and resonates with me. I wanted to talk quickly about you're you're frankly a top influencer, and I've been doing this for 20 years, and when I saw you in New York, I was like a fanboy. um I was taking pictures. I don't know if you
Yeah.
remember.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
like,
Of course.
yeah,
Yeah.
because you're like much taller than me, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things I admire about you is just your transparency. I grew up like in the 90s, fucking grunge rock, like let's burn it down, like, that culture at that time.
Totally.
And that was actually part of what I enjoyed about startups early on, that kind of subculture. But that's what one of the things I really admired about your transparency and these sort of things. If you were to give advice to founders or CEOs who are like, "Oh man, that looks good, but how do I do it, number one? Like, how do I get myself comfortable with that? And how do I convince others, maybe other executives at my organization? And if I do have an investor or a board as part of the organization, how do I get them to buy into it?"
So like, what I will say is, I have co-founders, but I have all of the control of my company. So like, I get some pushback from a couple people on this, just because it makes it, certain posts can be difficult for employees to read, you know, or at least it can be perceived that way. But uh, you know, ultimately, I have the luxury of it being my decision, right? Like, and by the way, this is not easy. Like last month, I posted a fourth monthly update that was down in a row, and it was down hard, like 2.3% or something. It's just, and by the way, like what I wrote, which was true, I was like, I don't really know when this is going to change. Like the leading indicators are dog shit, right? Like
Yeah.
the market's nasty for what we're doing all of a sudden. Um, Fortunately this month up 1.6. I'll take it. Have no idea what next month's going to be. It's not good. We're not out of the woods yet. But so like, I know why I'm doing it. The reason I'm doing it is because the way that I approach content is there's so much of it out there. You got to stand up. You got to stand out somehow. What do I have that nobody else has? I have the ability to walk around naked and I don't give a fuck, right? Like I will literally put my financials online and no one else will, and I don't care. So literally it's like, what else will I do that no one else is willing to do? Right? Like it seems like no one's willing to actually talk about their L's, right? Like everyone wants to share their dubs. Nobody wants to share this month really sucked for all of these reasons, God forbid. I mean, no one would ever dream of saying, I have no idea when we're going to figure this out, but I think that we will, because like, if you look at the trajectory of our company, it's just been a series of getting stuck and getting unstuck. Right. So I think if you can do it, it resonates with people because that's the actual journey. And it's not, the rest of social media is just the envy inducing machine, which like we're all kind of sick of, even though we're addicted to it. As for doing it, if you have investors, I think it's like most other things with investors. So long as things are going great, they're going to do whatever they're going to let you do whatever you want. Right. Like, unfortunately, if they have influence over you in a real way, even if they don't have control, they have a lot of influence over you. It's very easy, I imagine, because I've heard, to feel belittled by investors when you are not living up to what you sold them on, which is common because we all know this is not a straight line. I don't know what to say when someone's trying to really heavily influence you that gave you a lot of money and you're not delivering. That's another reason why. I mean, I think another reason why my content works so well is because like I am projecting this type of freedom. It just implicit in being able to do it. And a lot of the other shit that I say online is the fact that I don't have anybody to answer to.
Yeah.
So, totally. And I think people find that inspiring. It's like,
it
wow,
is.
like this guy really doesn't give a fuck.
Yeah,
right?
it is inspiring because you're tapping into like the rock and roll, man. Like,
it's like, dude, this guy is out of his mind. Like, I have never seen anything like this before, and he really doesn't give a fuck. So, so like, look, that's why I do it. And in my pushback to the people that push back internally, look, one thing they say, which I can relate to, it's like, nobody wants to find out about their company from a LinkedIn post. So I started emailing them the update a few days in advance. Fair enough, right? In terms of it conveying bad information, I think the employees, even if it doesn't feel good, would actually like to know about it, right? Like, number one, my argument is this. Number one, LinkedIn is the most valuable thing that we have going on for us. Unfortunately, the audience is not the employees. It's the 200,000 other people that read every post that I write, right? Yep. Sorry, but like that's the reality of it. And furthermore, they would like to know. I would like to know, right? Like if anything, it builds more trust between me and them that they actually know like what I'm really thinking about and dealing with, right? So yeah, that's that whole thought about that.
Yeah.
I feel like the trust that builds, it's just unbelievable, right? Like, like it's just like, I can't even describe to you like I just get thanked all the time by people. They're like, dude, thank you for keeping it so fucking real.
Yeah, right? I see it. I mean, people are like, you're my hero, like I see it all the time. Yeah, it's awesome.
Crazy. Yeah, it's in the
comments. And I love it so much. I maybe another day I'll tell you a couple other stories of some, experiences that where I communicated or tried to communicate in that way. But I wanted to shift gears quickly to more like a tactical go-to-market question that I had, because you also talk a lot about the modern day go-to-market, which I know LinkedIn is a huge part of, right? And if you had to kind of distill down, let's say, one key strategy or play that you would consider a must-do within this new modern motion, given that there are a couple options out there, anything that really comes to mind?
So like, The only reason I wouldn't say LinkedIn is a must do is because I only think it's a must do if you're selling to go to market people. You know what I mean? If you're selling to people who live on LinkedIn, I just think it's such a huge opportunity and so powerful that like not exploring how to unlock this channel, which is what it is like criminal. But I'm not going to sit here and say everybody should do it because I don't believe that. And the reason I don't believe it is because I was selling to Shopify stores before RB2B, and it was not it was doing something. It was worth having some presence, right? Like a ghostwriter, like whatever else, but it wasn't driving business that could be seen, right? I think that everybody should be doing this type of, I don't even know what the right word is for it, but like pirate cold email. You know what I mean? Like the whole, like, get a bunch of domains, get one of these lead gen agencies to manage it for you, just doing awareness demand gen like that, I think is like I just like love inbound machines. I just think they're super efficient. I think you can get to quite a bit of revenue with hardly any people. And the thing that I think is interesting now, the place that I find myself in, it's like I'm creating content and like there's a viral element to it. But then because of the megaphone that I had, I was going to start with like a go-to-market, with like a mid-market 30 to 50K CV sale, right? For this identity product. Probably would have been fine. Would have been really hard to get off the ground. But I'm like, my megaphone's so big that if I have something that's free, it's going to work a lot better than for somebody who doesn't have this megaphone.
Yeah.
I'm like, so then I started to realize the offer itself that you have can be viral, or it can have this, like, you know what I mean? It's like the offer itself can be structured in a way to where it will spread on its own. So what I believe about all of this stuff is that if you have something that is good enough to spread on its own, there are a lot of pieces of go-to-market that you can put in play that are going to help that move faster. I genuinely believe that if your product and the core offer behind it is not good enough to spread on its own, there is no go-to-market strategy that you could do that would actually work. It's going to feel like you're pushing on a string. It's going to feel like you're running as hard as you can and someone's just holding you back with a rope. The second that product market fit clicks, you're getting pulled. And then, you can run ads, like you can, do cold email and it works. Like you can, speed it up in a million different ways, agency programs, whatever. But I get called out on that all the time. And I'm like, well, that's like, saying, how do you be a model? It's like, well, you're a beautiful girl. You become a beautiful girl. It's like, how do you you know what I mean? But I just believe that. So that's my take on that.
Yeah. Well, speaking of product market fit, how do you know that you've achieved it? Is it that you start to be pulled, like you kind of alluded to?
I think that it is, like my first company never had it. And I just felt like we were trying to jam this down people's throats as hard as humanly possible. And if we stopped, it would stop. And then we had to stop because we ran out of leads. From the day I started retention.com, which was called Get Emails, it was kind of the other way around. It's like you would say what it did, and people's face would light up. It's like, I can get you the email of someone who visits your website and does not fill out a form 5 years ago to e-commerce companies, right? Like they're like, what? Is that legal? Like, how does it work? What do I send these people? And I did this great awareness campaign on Facebook. We had some cold email going, but like 97% was inbound, just related to the word of mouth and then this other kind of awareness stuff we were doing. So, I think, because so like a really savvy entrepreneur friend of mine who started a bunch of companies, he said, the companies that you start that seem, and I know a couple counterexamples, but if it feels really hard in the beginning, it usually continues feeling really hard. And again, I know some counterexamples. MailChimp is one of them. ConvertKit actually is one of them too. He was like really struggling for like 2 years and then it just blew up. And he's like, if in the beginning things are like really easy, then it usually stays really easy.
Mm.
So my first company to second company, it's like the ease of the second company relative to the first was just like night and day. You know, it was still a high churn product because it was a high churn product category and a high churn buyer persona. Selling leads as a SaaS to SMB is never going to be low churn. It's just not, which means this one's not either, but whatever. If I compare RB2B, and again, we haven't figured out our free to paid yet, but I think we're very close. If I compare RB2B to get emails, everything is 100 times easier.
Mm.
I mean, truly, this is like wonderful to show up every day and just be dumbfounded by the amount of product that was pulled out in the prior 24 hours. Right. So that's like, that to me is like what product market fit feels like. And, you know, sure, we're not charging many people for it yet, but we have a very good idea of what 10% of them will pay for, which is all I'm going for in the first place.
Awesome. Well, Adam, thank you so much for taking the time, for sharing your wisdom, for just inspiring us online, and then sharing also kind of the strategies that I think go to market professionals and founders can really use to crush it. I wanted to ask you, I was going to ask you what channels would be the best to reach you, but I think we all know that. Definitely go and follow Adam on LinkedIn. And, we are actually an RB2B user right now.
Rock
So,
on, man.
yeah, of course. It's awesome. And to your point, when I saw it, I was like, I need that right away.
Yeah.
And I need it in Slack right now.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
thank
Yeah.
you so
It's
much.
magical.
Absolutely. Well, for everyone out there, if there are any questions or you want to follow Adam, again, hit him up, check him out on LinkedIn. You will find the transparency and insights that we spoke to here today, and a really great guy. Adam, have a great day, and thank you so much again.
Thank you so much.